Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
So
Um,
that last
I
hour and
appreciate.
a half, that's going to be for the vault. But
Cool.
this I will upload to YouTube today.
Okay.
My YouTube requirements, for the day met. So with that in mind, it's the ceremonial start to all my YouTube videos.
Mhm.
Sometimes I forget to turn the camera on, but it always starts with the lighting of the incense.
Rituals are important things.
I skipped part of it. I also usually brush my teeth before I get on camera. Not
Yeah,
to make
well,
them shiny, but just to stimulate my mouth and get my consonants a bit crisper.
I feel the same way. It makes my mind feel a bit crisper in that moment, and it's nice. It's sort of just like an intense piece of gum or something for the first like 10 seconds. Um, so I appreciate you weathering the storm there and going in there with a hardcore SJW like me and, and talking about things we disagree with. But yeah, I still have like all the respect for you, and I appreciate you being able to deal with me. With that said, hopefully, I think in the rest of our conversation, maybe we can keep it a bit lighter or not. It depends where it goes. But I do know that
Let's
we have
restart
like,
a little. Who are you?
right? Who am I? Okay, so I'm for this. I'm John Conor. I am a former podcaster and content creator. And I used to largely focus on metaphysics, psychology, science, how we think, how we arrive at decisions. These are all things that interested me, and nature of consciousness questions as well. Maybe where even you kind of started, but not in the same point. But, anyway, that was a lot of the focus. I think I did a lot of great interviews. I think I did a lot of bad interviews. But that's just how it is as a content creator. You go with the flow and not everything turns out the way you wanted. But I did that. I collaborated with my brother on that, which was just kind of nice. It was a nice family project, and staying in touch with him because he's a great artist and has a lot of interesting thoughts in his head as well. And he would always design our bumpers. They're just beautiful. And he's actually been doing it more and more. And people are really loving his work. But anyway, so I did that for maybe like 2.5, 3, 4 years. I even got into, regrettably, not a lot, but the world I existed in had a lot of conspiracy theory, a lot of fantasy, and a lot of great things and a lot of interesting conversations. But I think the first time we talked, I said that, quantum physics is so used and abused in new age stuff or new age or counter new age or whatever, and it goes on and on. There's just like a lot of fuzzy thinking, and I got a bit frustrated, so I stepped away. And I haven't exactly figured out where I'm landing, but I still have always been first and foremost, like a political person and a politically minded person and a person concerned with the world, how I fit into it, the dynamics between us, what I can give the world, what I want the world to give to me, and, et cetera, and how things work. I'm interested in systems. I love systems theory. I play a lot of poker, so I'm interested in designing, systems for beating games, and I'm fascinated by that. And I do think the world is a large system, and in ways it can't be comprehended, but in ways it can. And I think that can make us all hopeful about our ability to comprehend. It's not as hard as you think, but we do have to work hard at it for sure. It's a lot of day-to-day effort, staying in touch with what's going on out there and in your own life. So I'm just kind of practicing that, just like paying closer attention to the world and paying closer attention to myself right now before I go off creating a lot of stuff that I just end up regretting later. That's where I'm at, but I'm really eager to still have conversations. It's just like, what do I want to have them about? And I'm not sure, who to talk to about things I care about. And everything we've talked about so far have been a lot of things I've cared about, all of it. And I really value this opportunity to speak with you, who's just like, you've heard it all, seen it all in terms of just like the political spectrum. And it's fun. And I really appreciate that. And it's fun to be here. So I'm happy to talk about anything, but I do know that we're both science fiction fans. And anything from Black Mirror to, which I know you've dissected a lot, but also Orville and Loving. And I guess maybe what we get out of science fiction, why we can pay attention to it, because there's a lot of things to pay attention to, but what about these stories? Because honestly, I don't watch Game of Thrones or anything like that. Like those don't stimulate me the same way. Like the fantasy genre, it doesn't feel like my world, whereas like these other things feel like extensions of my world. And that's kind of what I like about science fiction.
Well, I'm very excited for the final season of Game of Thrones. It is such a collection of just the best acting you're going to see. I mean, it's just such a great cast.
It's overwhelming to try to approach at this point. I'm so far behind the curve, it's a bit overwhelming. And really, like, my favorite show is like RuPaul's Drag Race, so I don't watch like too much TV right now. But yeah, I think I will someday for sure. My partner, I think, has seen the whole thing, and I loved fantasy as a kid. Like, I have no aversion to fantasy, but I don't know what it is. I think maybe it was video games that ruined me for fantasy, because a lot of what I used to play were like role-playing games, and those are always like quest-based, medieval inspired for the most part. It's that sort of motif. And so I guess in adulthood, as I've expanded, I've had a harder time coming back to that place, just because I think some of the video games I've played are masterpieces of storytelling, and it's like
what comes to mind?
The Final Fantasy genre is a role-playing game that was created by a company called Square Enix in Japan. In the late 80s, early 90s was when that started. And you could think of it as like Zelda on steroids. It's just like the storytelling, everything is taken to the next level. And there's several incarnations, Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, and only a number of them made it to the States. I think almost all of them, but not all of them. And there's several touchstones in that series. Like number 7 is just unbelievable. It's just like a very human story. It's very psychological. It feels very contemporary, even though it's out of time and place and has all sorts of motifs that don't make sense, but it's really cool. And it's a whole original world. And it just speaks to the human condition so beautifully, even though it's in this sort of like fantasy, we're saving the world sort of basic ABC story, but just the ability to communicate like stuff about relationships. Like I was kind of an isolated kid, and I feel like I almost learned like how to be sensitive and sympathetic through the media I interacted with. I learned almost like I was raised by my own computer. And so I feel like I learned from these things as well about like human dynamics, and we talked a lot about history in our past discussion, things about history and how that affects the present, and these grander narratives and how we fit into them. It just opened my mind to thinking bigger, I think, and that's what I really love about those. And so like Final Fantasy VII, any game nerd will tell you Final Fantasy VII. I love Final Fantasy VIII. 9 is great. The final incarnations are really fantastic. If I had, and then there's others called like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy Tactics. It's sort of like a Game of Thrones, only in, like 2-dimensional sprites, communicating through speech bubbles. So that was my Game of Thrones. It's called Final Fantasy Tactics, and it was all about political intrigue and people stabbing people and like people getting their heads cut off and people fucking each other. It was awesome, but I feel like I just binged on it as a youth, so I don't have the energy anymore.
I think, well, like my kids don't seem to care about TV. I mean, that's
good.
That's last century. I mean, they waste plenty of time online.
Yeah.
What they're doing, I think, is not superior, but it's just not their medium. But back in the early part of the 21st century, I mean, I know in a 100-year span, we're still in the early part of the 20th century or 21st century, but back in the aughts, TV underwent a really noticeable change in that suddenly you had stories that had far more subplots, ongoing subplots than was typical in the past. You had much larger casts of characters, much deeper investigations into subtle themes. And the shows that I think about, they're both sort of science fiction-y shows that were the earlier exemplars of this was Lost and Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined Ron Moore one. Mm-hmm. These had very, very large casts of characters. And they were some of the first shows where you couldn't really be a casual viewer, because if you were a casual viewer, you just weren't really going to follow it. It required a little extra, maybe going online, reading what other people thought was happening, getting summations of the storylines, bios of the characters. And I forget who said it, but at the time, as these shows were becoming popular, somebody, they got their 15 minutes of fame and got to do the talk show circuit by publishing a book that basically said, look, TV is just now starting to catch up to video games. You've got a generation of people who've grown up on very rich, detailed storytelling that takes place in the context of a video game. And when they go and they look at TV, they just see very simplistic narratives that don't engage them. So the really skillful shows are the ones that have these big casts of characters, that have these very complex, ongoing storylines and deep themes, but also put some stuff on the surface for the old TV viewers, to latch onto, and they can miss a lot of what's happening, but still enjoy the content. And that's a transformation that took place, I would say, in the aughts. Definitely the 90s were gone before this really picked up steam. And
I think it's fair to start it with Lost, maybe around that
Yeah.
time. I'm sure a historian could find better precedents, but that's a fair starting point. And for sure, I think I got I don't know exactly how many seasons there were of Lost, but I saw most of them. And I think I got to the last season and I got really burned out. It was just sort of getting bad for me. However, I judge bad. It was bad. And so I didn't even finish it. But I love
it either.
It's crazy, man. I put so much fucking time into that show and I didn't finish it. Anyway. So I do love the show in hindsight, but it is extremely frustrating also in hindsight. And I feel like shows, storytelling is evolving because our brains, in a lot of ways, you could say people are getting stupider or we're regressing in ways, but I do think evolution is a slow incremental process and also sometimes occurs in large jumps, and we can't predict these things. We just go with the flow, and we don't see it in our lifetimes usually. But our brains demand, I think, better storytelling and better narrative building. And I think that's definitely a good side effect of even, just watching a show, which seems so trivial and first world, but it's just but it does help us think clearer and better about some things. And for some people it's just vegging out, but for some of us it's a deeper, I don't want to say religious because I don't want to, but it's it's an intimacy there with an idol of some sort.
Well, that brings up a different media-related topic for me, and that is intellectual property and the fact that the Walt Disney Corporation owns Luke Skywalker and Captain America. I mean, Luke Skywalker and Captain America are cultural archetypes. They are the building blocks for modern myth-making. And it just seems absurd to me that a corporation can own them and can prevent people from coming up with and distributing their own stories that involve Captain America or Luke Skywalker. And Star Trek is, since, I don't hate Discovery. I hated season 1 of Discovery, and season 2 is deeply flawed, but much better.
Okay, that encourages me because I haven't gone there yet, but that encourages me to go there.
Yeah, and they've made a deliberate attempt to course correct on some of the serious missteps of season 1. It's not perfect, but it's better.
Okay.
And, I give them credit. Gosh, where were we going with that? Yes, CBS. So the writers, the actors, the designers, everybody is doing their best to create the content over there at Star Trek Discovery. But CBS corporate has turned really vicious in terms of how they relate to the fan community, because people have been making Star Trek fan films forever, since the original show found its second life in syndication and the first people got the idea to invite the cast to a convention somewhere. As Star Trek really is the original fandom in the sense of we think of fandom today. And it has been such a passionate fandom and such a creative one, and so many stories and just labors of love have come out of it. And it's been encouraged for decades until the backlash against Star Trek Discovery. And suddenly CBS, and CBS turned down Star Trek originally, it's just corporate mergers and, shenanigans behind the scenes, which have left the CBS corporation with the rights to Star Trek on TV, completely unearned. But, they've started suing fans. They have started shutting down fan productions. And really the big one was Axanar. Were you familiar with Axanar?
No.
Okay. So there's if you go into YouTube right now, you can find, just type in Prelude to Axanar. Axanar is Axanar. It is a fan production, but it features professional actors and excellent looking special effects. Really excellent.
Yeah, I'm looking at some screenshots.
It looks like Star Trek, whereas
totally.
Star Trek Discovery does not look like Star Trek.
Right.
And so, you know, there's a huge movement of people saying, look, we want Axanar. Axanar is it's the Star Trek that we want, updated with a modern look, you know, with good special effects.
Yeah.
And so the people that made Prelude to Axanar, they ran a Kickstarter campaign and they raised like a couple $1 million to make a feature-length film. And then CBS sued them and shut it down.
Yeah.
So that's
and again, corporate power, here we go again. So it's like, and
these corporations own the constituents of, you know, our mythological stories, that it is just human nature to remix these stories continuously, to infuse our own priorities and our own current interests into this familiar vehicle. And it's illegal to do that. And it's been tolerated for a while, but now it's not being tolerated.
Yeah. And I mean, I can tell you just like, again, the community I no longer really participate in, a lot of the artists in that community would run into copyright issues because a lot of their work was video work and analyzing movies and cutting and splicing and pasting. And it's just like, they just got, you know, copyright infringed off the internet and so on. So yeah, that's definitely something I've had my eye on, and my partner loves Star Trek, and they brought me into that world over the years we've been together now. So like, I think it was like in my household, but it was something my mom watched. I'm like, I don't care about Star Trek, but now I really care about it and I love it. And I think it's like really important. And similar to you, I do think like, yeah, these fandoms are relevant and these people are relevant. And this even gets back to video games. Like I'm paying slight attention to another video game from my childhood, and I'm like looking at this community. And when I look at the game itself, it actually kind of laid the groundwork for like all the big esports, electronic sports nowadays, which are called Defense of the Ancients and League of Legends, where they're these just giant, you control like a hero character and everyone just slugs it out and people love it. It's just a huge international phenomenon. But it was this game I was playing in 2003 that kind of like laid the foundation for it. And so just to like be aware of like the history and how things have built on each other, and that legacy effect, and like wanting to maintain that legacy within our media and having the freedoms to do that. That's definitely something that's relevant in an open society and an important question. So even something like Star Trek can get us into what do we want out of society, you know?
Are you familiar with the piece of legislation called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act?
No, if you could paraphrase.
I'll give you an example case which really sort of illustrates it. I don't know exactly how old Mickey Mouse is, but back in the late 90s, according to then, you know, contemporary copyright law, Mickey Mouse was about to enter the public domain because it had been so many decades since Walt Disney first, you know, created that character. And the Walt Disney Company lobbied Congress to change copyright law so that Disney had exclusive ownership of that piece of culture for several more decades, which I think is illustrative of, you know, what the intention of the legislation was. It was basically to protect corporate intellectual property from becoming, you know, public domain, which I think that period needs to be shortened considerably. You know, I want creators to have some financial reward, ample financial reward for what they do, but Walt Disney is long dead.
Mm-hmm.
His contributions to culture should be free for anybody to mix and match and use as they will now. That nobody alive at the Walt Disney Corporation created that character. Nobody has any more right to it than you do or I do, morally speaking. Legally, they own it.
Yeah, I've also seen that as kind of a solution, like just shortening the length of time. I don't need to see it gone. I don't need to like make it that extreme a demand. As I get older and I hope wiser, like as much as I disagree with capitalism and the way some things corporations do, it's like, you know, institutions are always going to exist. We're always going to have to deal with like these internal rules and how they operate, and like how we as people, like, not even if we got a basic income, there has to be some sort of room for like above that, you know, what for earning a lifestyle, whatever you want above that or something, right? Like, so I'm for that. I'm for that sort of, I created this, I should benefit from it in some way, you know? So I'm okay for offering some sort of legal protections to profit, as like capitalist as that is. It's workable for me. I think even like a socialist system or whatever the fuck we're going to have, like these are things that are going to be, you know, points of contention, but intellectual property as it stands now, I agree with you. It's like, yeah, it's too long. It's a bit, yeah, it's too much power in too concentrated a place. Cultural power, like we're talking about, like these are cultural artifacts, and we're talking about culture again, last conversation with culture now. These are things that make up our lives and our psychic spaces and our just human stories, you know. Captain America is a hero of, you know, it's Gilgamesh now, whatever, only it's in like a American capitalist Western point of view.
I picked Captain America. You know, there's so many iconic characters, superhero characters. I could have said Superman or Batman or something, but Captain America, because, you know, of his name, his color scheme, he's not just a heroic figure. He's a heroic figure who is specifically the champion of, you know, the best values of the United States. And the idea that a corporation could own that and prevent other people from telling stories with it just is offensive to me. But even worse than Captain America, Thor, a Norse god. You know, how is it that Disney can own a Norse god? Exclusive rights to tell stories about that god.
Yeah. And Thor, I mean, he's got kind of, I don't know. I guess I'd have to look at all of the representations of Thor over history to know like how archetypal the Marvel one is, or DC. I'm forgetting what universe.
It's Marvel.
Marvel, okay. To know like how easy it is to infringe on that copyright, because I imagine you could probably use some images of Thor, or is it just the name? I mean, like, I'm curious to see how far that goes, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was just totally ridiculous.
So I think Thor from Norse mythology was a redhead. So if you show a blonde Thor, that's infringing on Marvel's property.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, I don't know the answer, but I think that like as we continue to like try to check corporate power, which I'm really, you know, maybe over the last, I guess I'm paying close attention to how the world has been going the last like 11, 12, 13 years. I don't know. Corporations and that question have become like, at least I'd say, a more common topic of conversation, which is encouraging to me. Again, like if we're going to talk about people getting smarter in these things, I think these are more common conversations, even though you often are, you know, one of the, I don't know, few is the right word, but a handful who cover these topics regularly. And, but I am encouraged by that, you know, if we're going to talk about optimism, and like the sci-fi I like nowadays is optimistic, even though Black Mirror is pretty pessimistic, but I think it has some really encouraging like stuff to say, really empowering things to say, even in the darkness. That's what I like about Black Mirror. It's like, I never feel destroyed by it as much as it makes me cringe. But Orville and Star Trek are kind of on the opposite side of that. But I come kind of to a similar place with both of them. It's just like, these can teach us something about being human. That's useful.
Yeah, the Orville in particular, it's
amazing.
It's amazing, but it's, you know, as Star Trek has deliberately gone dark, the Orville has basically held up a mirror, I think, to the next generation and said,
totally,
look at this bright vision here. You know,
I feel like it was a complete read of Discovery. It's just like, you can't do this right. I'm going to fucking put this out there, and like, good luck keeping up, because I'm going to take all your fans. And I think that's like ultimately what's happening and going to happen.
Do you remember Seth MacFarlane played a bit part? It was a recurring character, but a very small character in Star Trek Enterprise.
No, that's amazing. I've only watched maybe the first season of Enterprise.
He might be in the first season, but he's just a minor figure in the engineering department. Sometimes when Trip is down in engineering, you know, giving a pep talk, there's Seth MacFarlane just standing there. But since he's not a lead, he's got a bit of a belly, And it looks like he's had some plastic surgery since then, to look
Yeah, of
more like
course.
the leading man on screen.
Yeah.
But he has been a hardcore fan of Star Trek for a very long time. And, Star Trek and Star Trek Discovery and the Orville were in production at the same time. So the Orville's not an answer to Discovery.
Correct.
It's just,
it just feels that way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like, it's a synchronicity. It's the coincidence of it. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm happy about it because I kind of getting into Discovery, me and my partner are like, man, this is letting us down. This is not what we wanted. This is not cool, but we did it and we got through it, but we wanted something. And we didn't even know again, cause I don't have a TV in my home, but we have just like a streaming internet service that we project when we want to watch something. And we didn't even know like the Orville existed because we didn't have Fox, and didn't pay attention to like tonight on Fox, tonight on NBC. It's like, I don't know. And I'm not on any fan forums or anything, so I don't know. And just like a friend at the airport said, we saw this Star Trek type thing. You should watch it. And it never looked back. It's definitely, it's just super. It's a good mix of like story adventure of the week with like prescient kind of commentary on the world, and it's really well balanced, and you can tell his love for the series and all the people. I feel it's very well casted, exceptionally well casted, and I have a few problems with the storyline this year, but whatever, it's whatever.
Well, what were your problems?
Why did they make Isaac, like the whole Isaac turning evil thing and needing to turn him into a hero or someone that needs to be like redeemed later? It's like he was already a jerk no one liked. It's like, let's make him more of a jerk no one likes and make him more, a journey to personhood. It's like, Jesus Christ. It's like he just like finally got his relationship with the doctor. That I felt like that was a big benchmark, and that was really cool. And again, for me, optimistic, and I appreciated that. And then it's just like, oh, but now we're actually Borg, and we're gonna like throw you out airlocks and shit for 2 episodes until he gets redeemed again somehow. I felt like that whole loop was a bit much. But
Seth MacFarlane claims that he had that in mind from the beginning.
I believe he did.
Part of the character.
And that's okay. Like I've reconciled myself with it. I was just confused at first because I felt like they were trying so hard to make him a more sympathetic character, and like really that sort of like the Grinch, his heart's growing and growing, and that's sort of like his evolution as a character. But it's like, no, he's actually like really evil, but not, he's a complicated character, which I appreciate. And I appreciate that they bring still complex storytelling to what is very much an homage, because it would be easy to fall into very stale sort of like been there, done it. So he does a great job at reinventing stuff.
Well, that 2-part episode was my least favorite 2 episodes of this current season.
Yeah, it was just a grind for me, but it turned out okay at the end. It was like I was kind of happy with how it ended, because I like the idea of the Krill and the human alliance. Like that was sort of for me what the trajectory of the season was those communities coming together. And I especially like Seth MacFarlane's relationship with one of the Krill, like that. I really I don't. Is the season over? We're on episode 10. I'm not sure.
No, I think there's 14 episodes this season.
Maybe 14. Okay.
So
I hope that gets wrapped up this season in some way, because
I hope we see that character again.
Yeah, their dynamic was hilarious. Like I remember in that the episode they're trapped in a cave because the Krill can't go outside, and they're like, just like so different. But then he like lays down, and she's like, lay on your side because you snore. And it's just like this very just like humanoid moment, it's just like it's like, okay, or just it's human in her. I don't know. It was cute, and this is the cuteness of the show I like, on top of some of the heavier stuff that they brought the last like few episodes.
Something that I have liked with the character of Isaac, and it's sort of borne out in that relationship between Ed Mercer and the Krill spy, is that like the doctor Claire, she says, I feel this emotional connection with Isaac. And other people, I'm thinking Kelly, who's saying, well, he doesn't feel anything, right? There is no connection. It's not a two-way thing. You're projecting something onto him. And she's like, yeah, I guess I kind of understand that. And then, as the story progresses, it seems like maybe Isaac is starting to, have some emotions of his own, but he's not. He isn't. He is incapable of that. That's not how he's built. He's not an organism. He doesn't process information that way. He learns to interact with humans in such a way that they find some satisfying emotional element to that interaction. but he's not feeling it. He never will feel it. That's just not the sort of entity he is. And with Ed and the Krill spy, he felt this really deep connection with her. And she says, nope, there was nothing there. I was just playing a role to use you. But with the Krill woman, you don't know that that's the case. There's still the possibility, because she is an organism. She is a humanoid. They do have relationships with one another. They do feel things. So there is a possibility.
Right.
Down, maybe she's lying to herself or she's lying to Ed, but she does feel something for him. But there's also the possibility that no, she was just a spy doing what she needed to do, and Ed felt something from her that was not there.
Mm-hmm.
I like that theme.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it. Again, I was talking about, I like video games because they teach me about relationships, but this is something else. It's like, this is, sometimes how relationships work, even ones that hold up over time, it's like we work with these patterns of our psychologies, and just being cognizant of them and like even thinking about them and having them part of our narratives and storylines is, it's relevant to our development. So I really like that. And yeah, I do. Although again, in those last two episodes that we just did were our least favorite, it seemed like towards the end, Isaac was developing like some sort of empathy or whatever, like he did turn. And the question is like, that's not completely clear why. Whether he just,
for sure.
Yeah. So like, what does that, like, what is loyalty as far as an emotion or a neural event? You know what I mean? Like, I guess we could like, it's impossible to answer, but so yes, that's true. Like, there was that element to it. Like, yeah, he can't, in that moment, that was the message, but they definitely changed that a little bit, I think. Like, he's like, maybe he's getting emotions, maybe not. But yes, that element of just like, projection and love and awesome. Another reason to enjoy it. It says it's personal and big and it's great.
So you have not seen any of Star Trek Discovery season 2?
Nothing of season 2. That I think like season 1, had like the tardigrades and the Doctor was sort of losing his mind and going into like a split persona, 2 double quantum reality thing happening. And it was interesting, but that's like kind of how it wrapped up. It was like a rather intense wrap up, and I think they had some fight with the Klingons at that planet with the crystal tree. I think that's like the final episode of season 1 or something close to that. Does that ring a bell?
Season 1 it basically wraps up with Giorgio from the Mirror Universe basically telling them how to beat the Klingons, and they have a bomb that they're going to plant underneath, in some strategically tectonically vulnerable area on the Klingon homeworld, and then they give the button that would detonate the bomb to L'Rell, the Klingon woman who helped.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. So no, to answer your question, I haven't seen season 2, but if you're welcome to talk about it, like I don't care about spoilers, but it's nothing I've seen.
Well, it's not a huge spoiler because they set it up at the very end of season 1 where, they're flying off to their next destination and hey, there's a ship hailing us. So who is it? Oh, it's the Enterprise. Remember that?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So they end basically nose to nose, Discovery and Enterprise.
Yeah.
Well, Captain Christopher Pike, the captain of the Enterprise before Kirk, basically comes over onto Discovery and takes command because the Enterprise is messed up and needs to be repaired. So he's going to be commanding Discovery for a while. And so they bring on the white male savior, basically, but they get a really great actor to play him. And he's written really well. And he's really working, and the fans really like him. So I think to sort of ease the passage, to sweeten the deal for people who don't want to see, a white man in the captain's chair, he also brings over with him his replacement science officer because Spock is gone. He's off on personal leave. So they've got a new guy in Spock's role who is the most obnoxious, know-it-all, white mansplainer. And they kill him off very quickly in a humiliating way in mid-mansplain, and then they never mention him again. Nobody cares that he's dead. Even his commanding officer, it's just such a non-event. It was just, here's a guy who's going to talk over Michael Burnham once, and we're going to murder him for it, and it's going to be funny, and it's a throwaway, and we never mention him again. Whereas, one of the big criticisms I had of the first season was they've got all these people on the bridge and you don't know who they are. They never mention their names. They never have any roles. So one of them is the woman who looks like a robot.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
she
cool.
she was a major player in the last 2 episodes. And she dies. And in a recent episode, it opens at her funeral and people are making all these speeches, emotional speeches about, you know, what a great person she was. And it's like, come on, she never even had any lines until it was time for her to die. And then you gave her just enough of a background so, you know, we kind of care that she dies.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going to have this big emotional funeral? Whereas this other guy who got killed as a joke just in passing, you never mentioned him again. Nobody cared. You know? So.
It's inconsistent that way. I mean, amongst its flaws, like, yeah, it's just like, okay, I'm supposed to muster this emotion for this moment, but it's like you've done nothing to build it. You know, it's like, yeah, it misses the point in a lot of ways, and asks us and begs us to care about characters that they have done nothing to make us care about. But you know, I am going to watch that season, and I think it'll probably go better.
As I say, it is a market improvement, and I can tell that they're trying.
Cool. Yeah, because I was hoping that they would be like immune to what was going on with like the Orville and the community, and like they wouldn't even listen. But I'm glad that they maybe kind of are.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not. It's not going to change. Like, it's always going to be that kind of aesthetic. I think. I don't know if that can be escaped, but and that tone, like that very like intense, we're at war all the time, sort of like overtone. I don't know if like that's still in season 2, but I felt like that was all season 1.
Well, yeah, all season 1 was this war with the Klingons, and
yeah,
fortunately, the Klingons play a tiny, tiny little role in season 2, and even that's too much. I just never want to see a Discovery Klingon again.
You hate the
never
design,
want to
right?
see another one.
But, or their everything, their culture, their like look, or is it like just like what?
It was the visual redesign. It's just
okay. Yeah.
I just never want to see it again. But, you know, they put hair on them for the second season, but they've left the stupid 3 times too big heads, and it's just it's awful.
I mean, it looks like Lord of the Rings orcs, kind of. You know, just
well, you know, people who are critical of them call them Klingorks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but comparing that to the Orville, you know, the krill on the Orville, they have the full head makeup. I mean, there's not a single piece of human skin showing, but they can emote through it. The makeup is designed well so that they can act. The Klingon makeup is terrible. It's like the Elephant Man. You know, you got to be John Hurt to project through all that latex.
They do disappear behind the costume completely.
Yeah. And then they put false teeth in their mouth and they have them speak a different language.
Yeah.
Terrible.
It's the actors get lost completely for sure. Like those are the unfortunate sides of those roles. They can be okay, but it's just like, I want to see something like more behind that.
But speaking of the Orville and its effect on Star Trek Discovery, if you saw any trailers for season 2, they have moments of levity and humor which are lifted directly from the Orville.
Okay.
And one of them, if you just watch the trailers, you know, the early trailers for season 2, there's a scene in an elevator where an alien turns and sneezes and blows snot all over some guy. And the guy that he blows snot all over is the mansplainer who gets killed in a jokey way.
Okay.
So they humiliate him a few times before they kill him off. But yeah, that was a very, lifted from the Orville moment. Like tonally, it didn't fit, but it's really an example of Star Trek Discovery writers answering to a criticism. Is that when Captain Pike comes over onto the bridge of the Discovery, the first thing he says is, "Hey, let's do a roll call. All you people stand up and tell me your names." Because for a whole season, they were just faces that you saw repeatedly, but they never had anything to do.
Yeah. That's what I'm wondering how the new Patrick Stewart show is going to shape up, and sort of like in what vision are they even aiming for? Is it going to be just like Discovery with Picard? Is it going to be, I'm just curious what's happening. I don't know. Cause like, it's sort of still, do you know more than me? Probably.
What I've heard is that Picard is no longer in Starfleet.
Okay. Yeah. Starting out the show.
Right. I know that Michael Chabon, the author of The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay,
Hmm.
He's one of the writers. I'm excited about that.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. I have great trepidation around that show. It could so suck, and it could so really reflect poorly back on, the next generation. That's something that Star Trek Discovery has been doing just with abandon, basically presenting us things which cause things that we've seen in the past, like in the original series, to not make sense anymore.
Mm.
Like,
yeah, like what in
well, in the original series, there's an episode where a computer researcher comes onto the Enterprise, and he basically fixes up the Enterprise to run in a completely automated way and be controlled by his new M5 computer. The scientist's name is Daystrom. So we hear, references to the Daystrom Institute thereafter, for decades. But if that was the most sophisticated AI around, when Kirk was the captain of the Enterprise, well, here we are 10 years earlier, and we've got a much, much more sophisticated AI.
Yeah.
Or,
right.
Captain Pike, he got burned by some radiation, and in the original series, he's in this wheelchair where he doesn't even have arms anymore. He's just encased from the neck down. He can't move. He can only communicate by causing a light to blink. It's yes or no. But then you've got Ariam, who is this robot lady, and we find out that she's like that because she was in this bad accident where she was, really mangled. So they rebuilt her as a robot, and she can walk, and she can talk, and she can do her job. So, a few years down the line, why is Chris Pike basically just built into his wheelchair with just 2 flashes for yes and 1 flash for no? It's like, did you guys watch the original series?
Oh, that's a fair point. I feel like we're the comic book nerds from The Simpsons, and we're just like,
I can go there. Let me tell
you. But this is like a fantasy moment that I enjoy living right now. So this is pretty awesome.
No, I can be the angry nerd troll. No problem.
Hey, it's like we got to get out aggression some way. This house. But yeah, the full spectrum, I think, of sci-fi to absorb and take in right now is really cool, and like a nice time to be alive for this form of media, because you can get a lot of different flavors of it, and it can be just episodes alone. Like I mean, we're talking about censorship on social media before, and the one Black Mirror episode where that's the whole thing, and like what's going on in China now was sort of that episode, in terms of like your status rating and et cetera, et cetera.
The big difference, though, is that in the Black Mirror episode, your social credit score is something you can opt out of if you choose to. You'll be accepting certain disadvantages in life, like you can't rent a good car, you can't get a first-class airline ticket or whatever, but you can still just say, you know what, I wash my hands of the whole thing, I'm not going to participate. It's largely this woman's obsession with her score, which drives her to do all these reprehensible things and basically engage in this sort of feedback loop of self-destruction. Mm-hmm. She's trying to get to this wedding where she's going to participate with this high-score couple, in this ceremony, which is going to raise her own score even more and qualify her to get into this good apartment. Mm-hmm. But it's all voluntary. It's all, life has been gamified, and she has taken it hook, line, and sinker, and she's just running with it. But there are people around her who don't. Whereas in China, that's not an option. Mm-hmm. If you've got a low social credit score, you're fucked. Mm-hmm. You are, you can't travel. It's going to get more draconian, I'm sure, as they become more fine-grained with it. But the level of social control that the Chinese government openly acknowledges is their aim with this technology, to me, is nightmarish, particularly because it won't stay in China. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I feel like, especially like Americans and like myself included, we're sort of controlled through our credit scores. And like, that's already pretty powerful. Like, that's always been, I guess, the thing where I'm like, oh man, everyone's just like, if you are your credit score to the rest of the world. So that's pretty rough. And that's like a very powerful thing. So I think of those as like in tandem, like, you just keep piling on to the credentialed system of having to live up to some standards. I do think some standards are fair. Like, I think that's what I was trying to get at in our past conversation. I think some standards are fair and fair to enforce, but, it can't be a closed conversation either. So I get that as well.
All right. Well, unfortunately, We've blown past our additional 30 minutes.
Yeah, we did about 45, which is cool, and I'm happy. And put whatever you want on YouTube. And I started recording the first conversation around 15 minutes in, but if you could maybe send me an MP3 or MP whatever of the original, I just like listening back to myself, and I don't have a Vault subscription, so I won't be able to listen to it.
Okay, well, I will get it to you.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And there's always a lot more to talk about, and I would love to talk to you again someday, sooner than later. I'm sure you have your own life, your own people to have in your show in the future, but I think we will disagree on things, but I think we're both like centered and responsible humans and can have these conversations and make them productive, I hope. And I like that. And maybe we can talk about Sam Harris in the next one and make that work. I would like to do that.
If you wanted to go and watch Captain Marvel and Alita Battle Angel, we can talk about those.
Okay. Yeah, I will. I wanted to see them both. And if it's an incentive to talk to you, I will go do
it. To me, they are of a piece. I mean, they're two sides of a coin.
For me, my two sides of the coin sci-fis are Annihilation and Ex Machina.
Oh.
They're made by the same director, and
Alex Garland, yeah.
It's, I mean, I haven't watched them back to back yet, but I feel like I have to, or like side to side somehow. Those are amazing films. They're my favorite, I think, ever.
I saw Ex Machina in the theater, and I have since watched it again on the small screen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember where I first saw. Oh, it's Annihilation that I've seen twice. Ex Machina, I've only seen the once, and I know it bears a second watching, but I just have no appetite for it. I don't know why.
That's fair. Annihilation I've seen like 3 or 4 times, and yeah, Ex Machina 3 or 4 times. But yeah, Annihilation definitely needed a second watching, so I'm glad you watched that twice. But I do think they fit together quite nicely, and they say, I don't know, they're hard to read, but for me, like, I read into it in my own way. That's what I like about film and media. It's like there's so many lenses you can apply to these things, and they all are kind of right. But that's, I don't know, it's harmless that way. For me, that's harmless discussion. Like, everyone can be right in this territory.
All righty.
All right, man. So thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
Bye-bye.